So this week, Chief Secretary to the Treasury, James Murray, went on Times Radio to talk about the spring statement. At one point, the interviewer asked him about welfare spending. What happened next was genuinely one of the most revealing few seconds of political interviewing that I've seen in months.
That is still £157 billion a year on welfare spending, and it's going to rise to £407 billion in 2030. That is nearly 7 times the defence budget. How can you justify that?
Well, look, we've been clear that welfare spending needs to be made sure it keeps under control.
Did you catch that? He was about to say reduced. His brain had already loaded the word, his mouth was halfway there, and then something fires, some survival instinct, some handler's voice in the back of his head, and then he swerves. Make sure to keep it under control. And Kate McCann, to her credit, caught it immediately.
Sorry, you can't say reduced. You were about to say reduced there, and you stopped yourself.
Well,
do you want to cut welfare spending?
No. Can I just be clear on this? Because there are different components of welfare spending, and we know that it's gotten out of control.
That's pretty impressive. And here's the thing. Murray then spent the next several minutes being asked over and over whether the government wants to cut welfare spending. He would not say yes. He would physically not bring himself to say the word cut or reduce in the same sentence as welfare. Instead, he talked about getting people back into work, about reforming the system, and about fraud and error. Everything except answering the question.
I'm asking about what's happening under your administration. Welfare spending is going to rise to £407 billion in 2030, 7 times the defence budget. Do you want to cut spending on welfare and benefits?
Look, we've already begun to reduce fraud and error in welfare. We've already begun to change the welfare system when it comes to universal credit.
Why can't you say that you want to reduce it? We are talking today about a very serious attack on British sovereign territory.
Look, there are two different questions you're asking there. On the one hand, what is crucial for me is that we get people into work wherever they are able to work. We need to make sure particularly young people who are long-term unemployed and who are not close to the job market.
Is £407 billion spent on welfare in this country acceptable? Does this Labour government want to cut spending on welfare, yes or no?
This government wants to get people into work.
But here's what I want to talk about. Because the interviewer was also doing something that politicians and media figures do it constantly, and it drives me absolutely mad. They keep throwing this number around, $330 billion a year on welfare. 7 times the defence budget, as though that figure speaks for itself, although the sheer size of it is the argument. 330 billion, outrageous, clearly too much. And at PMQ's today, Kemma Badenoch was at it too.
The truth is that because they spent money on welfare, there is no defence investment plan. Spending money on welfare instead of defence spending. When it comes to welfare, they find the money.
It's become this bipartisan consensus position. Welfare spending is too high, something must be done. And nobody ever follows it up with the only question that actually matters. What would you cut? Because I looked at the numbers, and the reason nobody will answer that question is because the answer makes them look terrible. The total social security bill for the year is forecast at $334 billion. That sounds enormous. It is enormous. But here's where it actually goes, and this is all from the government's own figures, published by the Department of Work and Pensions. 55% of it, $178 billion, goes to pensioners. The state pension alone costs £147 billion a year. That's not a policy choice some government made. That's a promise that we made to people who worked their entire lives, paid their national insurance, and are now retired. The triple lock means that it goes up every year. The population is ageing, which means more people claiming it every year. Nobody is cutting this. No politician in the country is going to stand up and say, I think your nan's getting too much money. It would be electoral suicide, and they know it. They proved that with the winter refuel allowance. So already, more than half of the welfare budget is off the table before anyone's even started arguing. So what's left? $76.9 billion goes on disability and sickness benefits, PIP, disability living allowance, attendance allowance, carers allowance. These are payments to people who are too ill or too disabled to work, or who are looking after someone who is. Now, there's a genuine conversation to be had about why disability claims are rising. All age groups have been getting sicker, and the NHS waiting list means that people aren't getting treated, mental health services are in the ruins. That is a real problem, but the solution to more people are getting sick is not give sick people less money. And yet this is the functionality that every politician who says welfare is too high is proposing, whether they admit it or not. Then there's the 37.8 billion on housing benefits, money that goes to people who can't afford their rent, a huge number of whom are actually working. They have jobs, they go to work every day, but because the wages are stagnant and the rent is through the roof, the government has to top up their income just so they can keep a roof over their head. Cutting housing benefit, and you don't save money, you create homelessness, which costs more. And universal credit, the big catch-all, covers everything from in-work top-ups for people on low wages to the unemployment element, to the housing element that I just mentioned. It's not one benefit, it's all about 6 different things duct taped together. When the politicians say they want to reform universal credit, that could mean literally anything, which of course is the point. But here's the number that should end this debate every single time it comes up. That amount the government spends on job seeker allowance, the actual specific benefit for unemployed people who are looking for work, you know, the thing that most people picture when a politician says welfare, is £307 million a year. Not billion, million. That is 0.09% of the welfare budget, less than 0.1%. You could abolish job seekers allowance entirely, every penny of it gone, and it would make up essentially no difference to the overall spending figure. None. It's just a rounding error. So when Kemi Badenoch stands up at PMQs and says that the government's priorities are all wrong because they're spending money on welfare instead of defence, what she's actually proposing, well, defence spending this year is at 62 billion. The welfare budget is 334 billion. Even if you strip out pensions entirely, you're still looking at 156 billion on everything else. Is she going to cut disability payments, housing benefit for working families, child benefit? Which one? Because she never says. None of them ever say. And that was what was so revealing about James Murray's little brain malfunction on Times Radio. He knows the government want to reduce welfare spending. Everyone in Westminster knows it. But he can't say it because the moment you say, we want to reduce welfare spending, the next question is, which bit?
We've already begun to change the welfare system when it comes to universal credit to make sure it's balanced towards getting people back into work. We've already started to take those steps to control welfare spending.
And every honest answer to that question involves taking money away from pensioners, disabled people, carers, or families who are already struggling. There is no version of this where you cut tens of billions from the welfare budget and only hit people that deserve it. The maths just doesn't work. It's never worked. Every politician who implies otherwise is lying to you, and they know that they're lying to you. Which is why exactly that James Murray's mouth tried to say one thing while his brain screamed at him to say another.
Well, look, we've been clear that welfare spending needs to be made sure it keeps under control.
Sorry, you can't say reduced. You were about to say reduced there, and you stopped yourself.
Well,
do you want to cut welfare spending?
Can I just be clear on this? Because there are different components of welfare spending, and we know that it's gotten out of control.
The welfare bill is not high because of scroungers. It's high because we have an ageing population, a broken housing market, stagnant wages, and a nation that's getting progressively sicker. Those are structural problems. They require structural solutions. What they do not require is a government minister doing verbal handbrake turns on Times Radio because he's too scared to say what he actually thinks, or an opposition leader who's happy to shout about the total number without ever once being specific about what they'll do differently. If you want to cut welfare, you say what you cut. These are real people, vulnerable people that you're proposing to take money away from. And if you can't say it, if the words literally won't come out of your mouth, James, maybe that tells you everything you need to know about whether it's the right thing to do or not.